But
dude, you were as big as a football.
I was as big
You're
as
as
a
big
football.
as a football, yeah. There you go.
45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30. He's gonna go. Holy cow.
Big Red Junkies.
Game by day. He gets better and better. Oh, man, woman, and child, he just turned this stadium inside out.
What's up, Vegas?
What's going on?
Glad to have you back.
Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Matt.
You spent New Year doing something fun. You went down to old El Paso.
I did.
Saw your Notre Dame play. Did they really even? Did you call that playing a game?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, but
It wasn't a very fair fight.
no. Talk about decimated from the portal. Oregon State was down to their third string quarterback. A lot of key guys out. I mean, we did too, but I think most of the guys that we had decided to come back because they're going to play next year, like Xavier Watts and a couple of guys on the defensive front. So, yeah, so we had essentially a full staff.
Which Oregon State also did not have.
No, they did not.
Because they kept what? They kept Trent Bray, their defensive coordinator. He's going to be the new head coach.
Yeah.
Former Nebraska guy. He was our linebackers coach here for a hot minute under Mike Riley. But they didn't really keep anybody else, did they? Or is he keeping other people on their staff? I haven't looked into it.
No, I think they just elevated some guys that were on that staff. I don't think Jonathan Smith took too many guys from that staff over to Michigan State. But
head scratcher for him. He's taking the defensive coordinator from Minnesota to be the D coordinator at Michigan State. That's a head scratcher for me. He's only been there for 3 seasons. In the last 2 seasons, it seems like the defense of Minnesota's regress.
Yeah, I think there were some key injuries for Minnesota that kind of affected that. Look, Jonathan Smith's a great coach. I mean,
yeah.
He stepped foot. Obviously, he's an alumni of Oregon State. Understand why he left. The opportunity to now to be at a Power 5 school was something.
Power 2 school,
yeah, outside of a Power 2 school.
Yeah,
to do that and then and just elevate, his skill set a little bit and get some recognition a little bit. But going back to the Sun Bowl, it was awesome. Like. It's something that you see on TV, that stadium. It's literally carved into a mountain. It
was beautiful, the pictures.
Yeah, it was it was breathtaking. It was probably the smallest stadium I've ever been to in a college environment.
What's the seat there?
52,000.
So it's like the exact same size as Minnesota Stadium. Then.
Yeah, it was just, you walk in and it's like...
Everything feels close.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like there's probably a bad seat in the house.
There wasn't.
When you're looking at it.
Yep.
At least that's the way it is when you go to Minnesota.
Yep. There wasn't a bad seat. And we sat kind of, 10-yard line, maybe 40 rows up.
Was it a full house? I know Notre Dame travels well.
Well, here's my theory on this: is so close to Mexico. A lot of Catholics in Mexico with the nationality.
Sure.
I'm not kidding. There were a lot of folks there that I don't think that, had citizenship. Put it that way.
Jesus.
I'm not being. I'm just saying it's just across the river, and there's 2.3 million people in Juarez.
You come across whenever you want to, and you choose to go to a bowl game. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was, I think I told you about it, when they got selected, and I was kind of hee-hawing around, and I think I even invited you to go, and
you talked about it. You're like, you want to go to El Paso? I'm like, no. I don't even know why you're asking, but no.
and Grant, my son, who's not a football fan, he last minute was like, yeah, I'll go, and he didn't have to work, and so 2 days before I decided to go. So,
nice.
Drove down. So
was the bowl did you guys do all the bowl experience stuff ahead of time and all that stuff, or did they not do much of that?
We did. They have a parade. It's a big deal down there. They have a Sun Bowl court. The Sun Bowl is the second oldest bowl behind the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl.
No kidding?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but they do it right. They do a parade. They have a little area where do the Battle of the Bands and kind of all festivities going out. It was a good environment.
Obviously, Grant couldn't drink while he was there because he's not 21 yet. But did you guys get to enjoy any of the party scene at all, or was it not much of that going on?
Nah, not really. I mean, we went out to dinner a lot and
Nice.
took in some truly amazing Mexican food. So that was the experience. But if you guys ever get the opportunity to go to El Paso, I mean, the city is lackluster somewhat, but the Sun Bowl is kind of a cool environment.
Experience.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe if we ever get back to a bowl game, we'll try. we'll get targeted for that one.
This is their year. I said that last year, but
hey, you heard it here, folks. Vegas is already calling a bowl game.
6-6. That's my prediction.
At least we should have a quarterback that won't constantly turn the ball over.
Well, I think your defense will be improved. I think there's some teams coming in that you might mark up as a win or mark up as a loss, but you'll be surprised that their styles are a little bit different than what they're accustomed to, and they got like USC and UCLA. So,
well, I think you saw Washington and Oregon, especially Washington towards the end of the season. Their defense has transitioned a little bit more towards knowing that they're headed to the Big Ten.
Yep.
You do not see that from UCLA or USC at all.
Nope.
And I mean, obviously USC made changes at coordinator position, and they're obviously recruiting really well towards their defense, and they're making changes, but that's after the season. I felt like Oregon and Washington were playing that way kind of already, especially Oregon, all season long.
Well, I think that's a footprint from who their coach is, right? He used to be the defensive coordinator at Georgia, and he's a defensive-minded coach. Matt Rule's the same way. He's defensive-minded. He's wrapping his hands around that. Obviously, very successful in year one as a defensive coordinator, defensive-minded. Kind of Nebraska's identity.
Yeah.
Now they just figure out their offense, and I think they'll be fine.
Well, the offense that we're going to talk about right now for Nebraska, or the identity, I guess, was more offense in '97. We want to debate this Nebraska-Michigan, and I thought nobody better to debate it with than a guy who grew up not a Husker fan and is a Notre Dame fan. You have no interest in either party, but you remember it. You're kind of a historian when it comes to college football.
Yeah.
I wish Jed could have been here tonight because he's obviously old and knows a lot more of the stuff than we do, but he sent us some
quick
notes.
jab. He's obviously old. Jesus.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. But anyway, we're talking Nebraska, Michigan. So right off the cuff, just thinking about it, what do you remember about '97? Because I mean, in '97, I was 9 years old. I remember watching the Nebraska-Tennessee game, which we've got on right now. I remember bits and pieces of it, but I was 9. It wasn't like I was analyzing football back then. Matt was 1?
I was 1.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't remember?
No, I don't. It's not my first Nebraska football experience, I don't think.
So the thing that really stands out about that season, and you guys hear about it probably year after year. So I remember being in a bar watching the Nebraska-Missouri game that year. That was the kick.
Yeah.
That was the kick. That was
Matt Davison caught it off the foot.
Yep, that was one of the most amazing finishes of a game I've ever seen. I was working at the 18th Amendment back in my glory days, I would say, and that's when Nebraska football parties were absolutely insane. Like literally, football game would start at 2:30. You'd have a line at the bar at 10 in the morning to get into the bar. So it was one of those environments. I just remember everybody was kind of down the whole game. Like, holy shit, we're going to lose this game.
Yeah.
And they were trailing most of the game. And that play happened and the place erupted.
Oh, bet.
But that,
I had goosebumps thinking about
that was, I mean, I'm not a Husker fan at all, like you said, but that was, like I said, out of anything I've ever seen, I was just like, I just said, whoa, wow, that was pretty cool.
That's like watching the closeout game. Like I've hated the Cubs for a long time, but watching the closeout game in 15, them winning the World Series, I was at Pipeline, and it was there was a ton of Cubs fans up there, and everybody went nuts when they won. That was a cool experience, and I hate the Cubs.
Oh yeah,
same type of deal.
Yeah, it was a remarkable season. I look at that roster, and we just talked about this before getting online here about just the talent that was on that team. Michigan.
It was insane.
Even their opponent here, like Tennessee, as we're watching this game now, just the Hall of Famers that are on those rosters is just amazing. Michigan, Nebraska, even Tennessee. It's amazing.
If we would have had a playoff that year, it would have been phenomenal. You'd have looked at Nebraska, Tennessee, Michigan, and probably Florida State.
Yeah,
Florida State won the ACC.
Yep.
And I was doing some looking at some other opponents out there. Like if you would have looked at it, if it potentially could have been, I think it was Washington State.
Ryan Leaf was with Washington State.
Yeah,
then,
but they had gotten beat by Florida State earlier in the season or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean,
I can't remember what
they had
one. But
they had 1 or 2 losses going into the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Yep, and I think Ryan Leaf progressed through the course of the year. That kind of elevated him to football royalty because he wasn't NFL royalty, but got him to where he was, because wasn't he the next year like the second pick in the draft?
Something like that, yeah.
After Peyton Manning.
But I mean, you look at what we have. I mean, a lot of people don't even think, especially if you're younger and you're watching this, a lot of people don't even think of Brian Griese as having played in the NFL.
Oh, I remember. He was a Bronco.
He was a Bronco. He was what, Broncos and Ravens? Is that right?
Broncos, Ravens. Yeah, I believe Ravens.
I think those were the two. But he didn't have a super long NFL career, but he's a great broadcaster. He's been in broadcasting now for a while.
He was a serviceable quarterback, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
he reminded me of Joe Flacco.
Yeah, he really did. That's a good analogy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of a Joe Flacco. But you get, I mean, just off Nebraska's side of things, in 98, we put Grant Wistrom and Jason Peters in the first round of the draft. You had Charles Woodson in 98's draft that obviously he won the Heisman. He was the last defensive player to win the Heisman, right?
Yep.
I think
he was a dual.
Yeah, he played on both sides of the ball, but he was mostly on defense, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Special teams. Yep.
Not like what's his name out in Colorado right now. What's his name?
Travis Hunter.
Hunter, yeah. He's dude. That guy's prolific on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I wonder what his playing time would have been if he didn't get hurt. Like I think in the second part of the season when he came back, I think they utilized him more in the offense.
Kind of had to.
Yeah, they had to, just to reserve
People
his
started
energy.
to figure out some of the shit Shedeur was doing, and it was like, you guys don't have an offensive line.
Yeah.
We're bringing the house on you every time. But I mean, you go through this list of guys that's out there, and it's just like you said, littered with Hall of Famers. You got guys on here that had tremendous careers. Amon Green, he had what, an 18-year or 15 or 16-year career.
I mean, he's in the NFL Hall of Fame, right?
I don't think he is yet.
If he's not, I'm sure he will be eventually.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, you have, Joel Makovica. He played in the NFL.
Makovic, and he went 99. He was in the 4th round.
Good old Joel.
Yeah.
I still
need to get him on here sometime.
Yeah, we should.
We need to get him on here with you on here one of these times.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun.
When we're drinking heavy on like a Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But, I mean, when you look at the two teams, it was basically Nebraska was an offensive juggernaut with a good defense, and Michigan was the opposite. They were a defensive juggernaut with a good offense.
Yep.
And the argument, obviously, you could only ever speculate back and forth. And it's funny, I was trying to get ChatGPT suckered into actually giving me a simulation or a pick. Wouldn't do it. It didn't matter how many different ways I asked. It was like, speculating on this would be irresponsible and blah, 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 blah. And I can only tell you that both teams were great in their own rights and all this different stuff. And I couldn't get it out. A lot of people have run simulations. You can find videos of people with, I did 500 simulations with these two teams. It's like, well, how accurate were you down to the split when it comes to all the different stats and things that you put in? First of all, but second of all, come on. We're talking about computer simulations from 97.
Right.
We don't have a lot of accurate analytics on stuff like that. But it's fun to look at. It's fun to talk about. I personally, like when I just take a step back and I look at like records and things like that, Michigan played a tougher schedule than Nebraska. Hands down.
I think by proxy of being in the Big Ten, that's true.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to comment on that is back in the 90s, Nebraska, if you look at like conferences' identities, if you look at nowadays, conferences have identities, right? The Pac-12 is just, air raid, throw it out. Defenses, do they matter? Maybe, maybe not. Then you had you have the Pac-12 kind of the same way, but you have some feisty teams. Big Ten, pound and ground, really tough defenses. SEC kind of all around same way. You have a little bit of both, but the teams that are successful are the consistent, pro style offenses are developing to that ACC kind of the same way. Back in the 90s, I think Nebraska really had an identity of what a true Big Ten team looked like. Really feisty defense, pound and ground offenses. They utilized the pass when they needed to. So I think that matchup.
They utilized the pass to open up the run as opposed to using the run to open up the pass.
Right. And I honestly believe that game would have been spectacular just because the styles of offense and defense were very similar, especially on the defensive side. They were both feisty, and it would have been a great matchup.
Well, when you look at it, and obviously back then especially, it was you had the AP poll and you had the coaches poll, and those were how you determine a national champion. There was no playoff. This was the last year before the BCS. So maybe it was fantastic that it was all fucked up and nobody knew actually who won it because
it's kind of like
give us a reason to bring the BCS in the next year.
If you look at it, it's kind of like this year with the 4-team playoff.
Oh God, yes.
You essentially had argument for a true 6-team playoff, really.
Absolutely.
I think the 6 teams that people say, well, Florida State didn't deserve it. Look what they happened to them. But, truly, if they would have made a playoff, those guys wouldn't have sat. That defense was sick. And their backup quarterback was pretty good. And he would have played in that game, So
you also look at what Georgia did in that game. It's not like they were playing against scrubs, but they were playing against Georgia needed to lose a game.
Yeah.
And they finally have. Now that monkey was off their back, and then it's go time.
Yep.
And I think it didn't matter who they were going to play in their bowl game. No. They were going to drub them. It didn't matter how many people were going to sit out. If Florida State played at full strength, even still just missing their quarterback, I think they still lose that game by probably 25 points. It was wild how just methodical they were at just dismantling everything Florida State was doing. It didn't matter, both sides of the ball.
I think that breaks it down to culture. What Georgia, they don't like losing. They want to make a statement. That statement is hopefully was going to carry them into next year. And I think that was a statement game for them. And hats off to Kirby Smart doing that. So that it just reminded me of the last year of the AP coaches poll, AP poll going into the BCS. Kind of the same thing that's going on now. Going
the BCS, and correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't gone back and studied it all, but basically the BCS took what the coaches poll, the AP poll said, but then it also ran computer model ranking based on strength of schedule and things like that, and it factored all of that together to spit out the rankings, right?
Yeah. It was heavily weighted on the computer polls too. Computer, whatever inputs they put in statistically, and it would pop out whatever. And,
I remember they used to talk about strength of schedule as much in football as they talk about it every time March Madness is getting ready to come up with the whole bubble and this team is better than this team because of this strength of schedule and this rating over this, and you don't ever hear them talk about that anymore because now it's all eye test who's better. Who are we going to put in? That's basically what it is.
Yeah, it is. It's like I had a Facebook argument about what Georgia did to Florida State and saying, look what they did. They should have been in over Alabama. I'm like, how do you where do you get that? They just lost.
Georgia just lost to Alabama.
Because they had a bad game. Well, okay.
If you have that's football. If you have one bad game, you're out.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. Check in the NFL. You get in the playoffs. You have one bad game, you're fucking gone. Yeah. You're not, clearly Kansas City's better than this. We got to let them play again next week. Well, that's not the way that works.
It's just like the argument about Alabama and Texas. If Alabama got left out, they're like, well, they're better than Texas. I go, they are not better than Texas because they lost to Texas.
Yeah.
At home by 10 this year with the same staff, the same team. Well, they're playing different.
Were they a better team by the end of the year? Alabama was a great example of building a team and growing throughout the year.
But were they? They trailed in. They put a stat out during that game. I think 6 of their games they trailed in the second half.
I believe it. They almost lost to Auburn, and then
Yeah.
they somehow wound up winning by like 11 or something like that.
Yeah, it was
like a last-second fluke type thing.
fumble. They scored, but how they took the lead was 4th and 29, and he threw a bomb to the back of the end zone to win the game. He doesn't complete that. Auburn just
It was absolutely insane throw and catch. But
it was insane. It was a great play. That kid's
one of those
good
moments
player.
of destiny type situations.
He's a good player.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good player.
He's going to be scary good next year.
He's going to be scary good. That team's going to be scary good.
Yeah. It was interesting to see Alabama have so many opt-outs, or not opt-outs, but dudes jump in the portal the moment their season ended.
Yeah.
It was like right after the game, 15. It's like, go.
Yep.
But that's also what you talked about, a difference in the culture between like what happened at Florida State and what happened with Alabama. Those dudes stuck it out. They were going to play in the playoff, so they waited to opt out until after the playoff.
Why wouldn't you? I
Yes.
mean, you're playing for a title.
And that's
right?
where I think it's truly going to be better for the sport
Yep.
to have an expanded playoff that really forces those kids to stick around and play.
I even had a solution above and beyond that. It would be expand the playoff to all 7 and 5 teams or better. I think
the other thing you can do with that, I like that idea. The other thing you can do with that is these bowls are big money makers.
They are.
Make it an NIL deal for the kids.
Yeah.
Hey, you're going to get a bowl bonus if you play in the bowl game.
Yeah, you're right. And
You telling me that an extra 10 or 12 grand to stick around and practice for 2 more weeks and play in a game isn't worth it to these kids?
yeah, I think, in my opinion, I think as if they don't change something, if they don't make a correction to this, even if it's a slight change, moving the season up to right after their title game into the playoffs and end to the bowl season, I think the bowls that beyond the 12-team playoff will get really affected. And I'm talking about attendance.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
nobody cares about those games anymore.
yeah. I mean, were there a lot of Notre Dame fans in El Paso? Yeah, but did they come from the Midwest? I don't think so. I think they all came from like West Texas, Mexico, Arizona, California, where they don't typically go see games. But there weren't any Oregon State fans. Like, I would say 200. I mean, to be quite honest. But
I don't know how many Oregon State fans there are.
no, that's a good point.
It was 100 sets of parents is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
It was all the kids' parents out there.
No, but if you get a program, I'd say say Nebraska, that travels well typically to any game, and you get on a run of 4 or 5 bowl games, and then that 6th bowl game, everybody decides to opt out. Who's going to go? Like, right? I mean, it's a glorified scrimmage for next year. It's kind of the way it's kind of being targeted.
The big thing is that it still gives the team the ability to practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I also think that's BS. If you're going to give them the ability to practice during those times, everyone should be able to practice during those times, and regardless whether or not you're going to bowl game. Yep.
And another thing that I noticed, having that time off, watching all these bowl games is a lot of injuries.
Oh yeah.
Did you notice that?
Yep.
And a lot of penalties. It was just like it was like starting over.
It's like week 1 again.
Yeah, but because of multiple reasons. You got guys that aren't used to playing on both sides of the ball, especially offensive line, defensive line. These guys are just coming in. Hey, I took 9 snaps this year. I'm starting. Cool. They're gonna have errors, and 15 practices or whatever you're giving these kids going into the preparation is quite. I don't think it's enough time, right? You know, they're taking snaps during the course of the year, but they're not taking
they're not taking game reps.
They're not taking game reps.
Snaps.
Yeah, they're not. They're
not doing a lot of that.
They're doing
stuff
10%, right? 10%.
And it's cool to see. You mentioned before the show. You mentioned the kid for USC that came out and just blew everybody's doors off, and it was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, it's cool to see those stories, but there was like what, 4 or 5 of those stories for all the bowls.
Kid from Kansas State.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, there's a few of those stories and that's really cool. You know, whatever, we saw that guy move on. You know, Will, what's his name?
Will Howard.
Will Howard. You know, he moved on, so then it gave him an opportunity to go start in that bowl game.
Yep.
Cool, awesome. It doesn't make the product on the field for the majority of what's going on. It doesn't make the product on the field good.
No.
And you don't want to root for your team the whole year, and then all of a sudden you're in the bowl game, you're excited, and you want people to travel to these bowl games. You're excited for the bowl game, but all of a sudden you don't know half the players that are out on the field. You don't know what this is even going to look like.
Yeah, unless they take valuable snaps. Like, I'll take Notre Dame, for example. Their backup quarterback, obviously Sam Hartman sat. I think that was a decision. It was a mutual decision, I think, by him and Freeman, because Freeman wanted to see who he had.
Sure.
But that guy took snaps during the year. It wasn't like he came in, he was taking, this is his, 20th snap in a game. He did some valuable playing time during the course of the year. So let's see what you have. Yeah. So, yeah.
We kind of went off on a tangent there.
But good discussion.
No, I like all the conversation about the playoff and just how the bowls in general right now, they just don't feel good.
No.
Like the Pick'em League that we're in, it was like the first,
it was hilarious.
Probably the first 7 or 8 games. Those are all your mid-major schools they're coming in. You're seeing full rosters there because they don't have a lot of NFL talent that's going to sit for the draft. They're not having dudes, for the majority of them, they're not having dudes leave to transfer. And if they are, they're not like high impact guys.
Nope.
But so you saw those, and those were reasonably easy to still pick, and they were good games. Most of them were pretty good games.
Yeah, entertaining for sure.
They were.
Yep. And then it was just like train wreck.
Yep.
It was like, cool. I just will sit back and throw darts at the dartboard here because even the slight bit of research that you can do when you don't know what kids are playing or not playing half the time, even the slight bit of research you can do, you're at a total loss because
10 point swings a day before the game starts. Like,
my
day of the game started.
Day of the game, like
my bookie was salivating, and he did. He ate steak off me.
I think everybody's did.
Yeah,
I think everybody's did.
So I think when I go into the bowl season, I think I need to take in an opt-out factor of -10 or +10.
But it's different for every team.
It is.
It's different for every team.
You got to understand their starting lineup and the key guys that are out. Obviously the Florida State was an easy one, but like teams like
Clemson was
Iowa.
Clemson was a tough one for me.
Iowa and Tennessee, that one puzzled me.
Well, that was just showing that there's a lot of what goes on in the Big Ten, especially in the Big Ten West prior to next year, that is just shit football. It's just shit football. That 10-2 record, it's a garbage 10-2 record.
Yep.
Like I realized that Nebraska got beat by them. We got beat by several teams that we should have beat this year, but we were also a garbage football team that ended with, a sub 500 record. So we had showed it on paper. Iowa didn't show it on paper. That Tennessee game was exactly what it should have been because Tennessee was, they're missing their quarterback. They were missing a couple other key guys, but they still play defense. They still play in the SEC and they play big boy football.
Well, that quarterback's pretty special though.
He
was a 5-star. He was a 5-star recruit, and
I actually saw an article earlier today.
Do
they have a future NFL star at Tennessee?
If he stays there.
Well, I don't know why he wouldn't. Josh Heupel's a good.
Yeah, but like I said, it's like I have a philosophy on it. It's almost like guys get recruited, but it's almost like a junior college. I think I sent that in text, kind of explaining Colorado's situation and kind of the identity of the transfer portal. And that was my concern about Raiola coming. It's like, is he going to treat this like a junior college? Like, he's going to get some reps, he's going to showcase his talent, and then he's going to take his football and go somewhere else. And that's my concern with the portal and how it's aligned. I've got my philosophy on it. There's good things and bad things, but I don't like the way it's being kind of overutilized multiple times by certain players. So,
well, you're also seeing that there's a lot of players that they're just plain and simple wrecking their careers because they jump in the portal thinking, I'm going to have all this opportunity. Well, you and 3,000 other players just jumped in the portal, and there's 14 of you in here. And we got to see that you don't have that much loyalty.
Yep. Yeah.
That's like jumping in the portal to me, especially after a year or 2 years, if you went and showed out at a lesser school on a lesser team and you're going to jump in the portal and just leave them and you're not worried about trying to build something where you are.
Yeah.
If you're at an FCS school or if you're at a whatever and you really ball out and you've got opportunity to go play big boy football, that's different.
Like Jared Verse from Florida State. Good example.
Yes, great example. But what I don't think what I think you're going to see a lot more of are teams like Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan and the big boys in the sport that are just going to start saying, you're not loyal, we don't want you. There's other people that are equally talented to you or almost as talented as you that I can count on their loyalty and being able to actually build them. As opposed, because I think you saw some of that with the quarterbacks this year. In the way that the transfer portal has gone, I think you also saw that the numbers that were being floated out there, people were talking about Cam Ward getting $5 million, $6 million. I think he thought he was going to, and he went on all these trips and found out there ain't shit out there for that.
Yeah.
There was all these numbers being reported. Raiola is only coming to Nebraska because we're paying him $1.5 million or $2 million a year. Bullshit. He got like 1.8 spread out over 4. Tell me Georgia couldn't afford to pay him that?
Well,
fuck off. He wanted a chance to come up here and build something. He wanted a chance to play in a stadium that his dad's name's on. That's the only thing. Like, I absolutely 100% agree with you as far as kids going to a certain place and using it like a JUCO and doing that whole thing.
It's a business decision.
Maybe
right?
he'll make that decision to leave here if Nebraska's just stalled out and we're not going to get better.
Yeah.
But I think if he sees incremental change and the defense is a little bit better than it was last year, which would make us a top 15 team instead of a top 16 team on defense. If all of a sudden the offense is a little bit better just because of the fact that we can actually hold on to the fucking ball and complete a drive, maybe we see some progress and we win 7 or 8 games. You can see that stepping stone and you can see, oh wow, if I stay here and actually turn into what I'm supposed to, we could be a contender in 2 or 3 years. Whereas if he was going to go to a Minnesota or if he was going to go to a team that's expected to be 500, 7 wins, 8 wins, and that's your max, then yeah, that's JUCO style right there, hardcore.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just seems like the powers out there, the Oregons, the Florida States, the Clemsons, even Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, USC, they just shift guys. I'm bringing in this guy this year. I'm bringing in this guy this year. And even Notre Dame, like, we got Riley Leonard from Duke. We had Sam Hartman last year. And the whole upheaval is like, we need to bring in these guys up. But you got to win now. It's that we got to win now. How do you get out over the next hump? So I think that's the mentality. And a lot of folks are going to be using the portal to do that. I just hope Nebraska isn't they're not going to be sacrificed, Raiola's talent to go somewhere else.
To go leave and go actually have a chance to win.
Now, speaking of that, the kid from Bellevue West is a stud.
Danny Kaelin,
he put up similar numbers in his high school career, and he progressed over time.
And they didn't win a lot. He's a lot smaller bodied dude, but he's super accurate. He beat Dylan Raiola head to head in the accuracy contest at the Elite 11. They went to multiple quarterback camps, and Raiola ultimately won out on the majority of those that are out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm excited for what the future at quarterback has for us, just simply because of the fact that we have real quarterbacks in the room.
Right. And unfortunate that
you don't want to rely on a tight end to carry you through 5 games.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that your tight end might be playing for you as a starter because he's got experience, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. So
I don't know. We'll see how that winds up. But, when we dive back into the Nebraska-Michigan debate, the whole reason I wanted to do this was kind of as a joke because, we'll see if Michigan can actually win a natty, and actually own all of it. But when you look at this both ways, like truly just looking at it across the board, I couldn't say one way or the other. Just looking at stats.
Except for the number of touchdowns by the team on the year.
Well, no. I'm just talking about the way that they lined up against their opponent. Like opponents, like this is some stats Jed threw out there. Nebraska played 4 ranked teams. Michigan played 7. 2 of them were in the top 4 for Michigan. 2 were in the top 3 for Nebraska when we played them. But we also played different teams at different times. Like if you look at after the season ended, where all these teams wound up that we played, as opposed to the preseason where they started, which is where these numbers come from, it's very shifted. It's very different because there were 2 or 3 different teams that Michigan played while they were ranked that ended the season not ranked, that ended like 500. And there were a couple teams that we played. When we played them, they weren't ranked and they wound up ranked at the end of the season. So, like, Missouri was a case of that. Like, Missouri wound up, I think they finished the season the 14th or 16th, but they weren't ranked when we played them the week before when we barely beat them. But you had opponent win percentage. Nebraska's opponents, 50%. Michigan's were 52%. I mean, you look at this stuff up and down the line. Offense, like I said before, offense and defense, great matchup. Offense, defense, both were a little bit weaker, but great matchup. It's coaching-wise, I mean, Osborne had been there forever. I think that Carr had only been there since 95 or something like that. He wasn't there for a super long time.
Yeah, he took over, I think it was like 90, I think maybe a little before that, 93 or 94. Jim Beckler retired.
It was kind of a quick build, but I mean, we already talked about the guys that we put in the NFL. I mean, Nebraska put in, Jesus.
On that team.
Put 13 dudes in the NFL over the next 2 years, and Michigan put
9.
It looks like 9. I mean, and there's, like you said before, it's littered with Hall of Famers on here. They were both super awesome teams, and it's just upsetting that we didn't get to see them play.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't even an avid football fan at 9 years old. We were living in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and had 2 TV channels. Like
Matt wasn't either at one.
No.
I was as big of a football fan as you can be at one.
But dude, you were as big as a football.
I was as big as a football.
As a football, yeah. There you go. It would be interesting to see both ways. I went and did, I probably watched 5 or 6 different videos of guys going back and forth. Rich Eisen, you know who that is?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
He's big on NFL Network. And anyway, he's a Michigan alum. And he kind of did like a tour of interviews about this, specifically when Scott Frost got hired to come into Nebraska. He asked him, and it put a jump off where he ended up debating with a couple different non-Nebraska people that were in support of Nebraska being the rightful champion that year. And he didn't really make any big points other than like Homer stuff because he's an alum. But he, when I listened to everybody else that was on the outside of those talk about it, everybody's kind of like, I hate to pick it. Like, if I had to pick it, it's like 1 point this way or 2 points that way.
Oh, yeah.
All of them. And that's actually the majority of the simulations that have been done. All have run that way. Would have been like the majority of them came out, like, I think the average score was Nebraska 29, Michigan 27.
Yeah, in my opinion, it would have been a lot lower score than that just because you're pitting 2 really excellent defenses. But I agree. I think when you asked me, like, how are you going to debate this? I said neutral, because the reason being is I was looking at the talent just like you were on that field. I wasn't looking at the statistics, but I was like, how did they play? I mean, how were they physical? Yeah, they were both physical.
Both of them were physical, yeah.
So I could see this, not a stone fight like an Iowa-Nebraska game nowadays, but definitely like, who's got the best kicker? Who's got the best special teams? Like, those are the intangibles that you would probably, to pick the winner, really have to decipher. Not the star players, but who is the best field goal kicker? Who had the best punter? Who had the best punt coverage? That type of thing.
I also, when I was making, like, because I want to make a pick here in just a minute, but when I was making my pick, I also had to factor coaches. When you look at the fact that Carr had only been there for 2 seasons prior to this, and you look at what Osborne was doing and the build on that, and if they had played that year, it would have been Osborne's last game, and everybody already knew that. And all of these things, it's like, I don't know, kind of getting goosebumps just thinking about what that moment would have been like. It would have been an epic football game.
Yeah, would have been fun to watch.
Epic football game. Did you have anything to add, Matt? I feel like we've not heard you talk hardly at all.
That part of why I haven't been talking is just because of my voice, the way it is. But no, they were dead even teams. Nebraska's offense that year was just insane. That's the only difference maker for me. They just scored so many fucking points.
They clobbered everybody.
Everybody. I mean, they put up damn near 80 points in 2 different games. Like that would have really been the only thing, is if Michigan's defense could have kept up with them. But their defense was insane. Yeah. They allowed 10 touchdowns on the year. So, I mean,
never let anybody score over 26 points.
No.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Only other thing that you can even point to be together was the one common opponent was Colorado. Michigan played Colorado the first game of the season.
Poor fucking Colorado.
Yeah, Michigan played Colorado the first game of the season. And, I mean, Colorado was good back then. They weren't great in 97, but they were.
I mean, they started the season ranked 8th.
They were known to be a good team back then, is what I mean. Yeah. And so that's kind of the Fugazi moment for Michigan's schedule when you look at a few of their opponents didn't end the season ranked, whereas when they played them, they were highly rated. Because Colorado was, like you said, just rated 8th when they played them. But by the time Nebraska played them, they were a better team, but they weren't ranked anymore.
Right.
And that's the big difference for me, though, is Michigan won the Colorado game 27-3. Nebraska won 27-24, I think. Something like that. It's just that's the only common opponent you could say. But you have Colorado, second to last game of the season for Nebraska as opposed to the first game of the season for Michigan.
Right. Yep. Was that Cordell Stewart, Michael Westbrook days at Colorado? It seems like. Because I think
that might have been.
I think the year before or the year after, Colorado threw that Hail Mary and won the game against Michigan.
Cordell Stewart.
It might have been the year after.
No, I think it was the year after.
Yep.
The year after. Looks like John Hessler was their starter that year.
John Hessler. Okay. Yep. I remember him.
You say that like you remember him. I would not remember him at all.
Yeah.
My pick on it, obviously, I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to pick Nebraska. I think the stats back it up either way.
I'm going to go with Nebraska, too. I think they would have won 21-17.
It's on a Nebraska show.
No. I think it would come down, just like I said, special teams. We were talking about their punter. And I go, Did that guy play in the NFL? And you're like, I believe he did.
I think 17 or 18 years, something like that.
Yeah. So I think guys like that make a difference in games like that hypothetical matchup. And I couldn't tell you who Michigan's punter was or kicker.
Well, and Jed was kind of talking about him a little bit because of his son being in this recruiting class and how he was the guy that invented a lot of the modern day styles of punting, the different positions to kick the ball. It used to just line up and you tilt it a little bit and you boot that baby as hard as you can.
Yep.
And he was, teaching directional punting and English and all those different things on how to get the ball to roll back as opposed to forward. And I don't know. I got Nebraska, Matt.
Obviously Nebraska.
Maybe Michigan will win one this week. It's kind of fun to see that it's a battle of the Big Ten and Big Ten future. But
do you guys have a pick for the game on Monday?
Oh, we're about to do that segment.
Oh, yeah.
And this may be the most unbelievable night in Cornhusker football history.